Hi, I'm Ms. Matsuoka, and I'm going to teach you about how to solve a quadratic by factoring. So here are our steps. First, you're going to set the equation equal to 0. So you're going to replace 0 or y with 0. Then you're going to factor using the techniques that we've learned from the previous videos. And then we're going to set both factors equal to 0. We solve for x on both equations, and then we write them as points. The y-coordinate will be 0. Alright, let's start with our first one. So with this first one, we can kind of see we're going to be doing the easy factoring with x. So we have it's a trinomial, right? It has three different terms. So we have the x squared, the x, and the number. So we're just going to do it with the x. On the top, we're going to put that -8. On the bottom, we put the -2. On the sides, it's going to be -4 and +2. Because remember, -4 times 2 gives me -8, -4 plus 2 gives me -2. So in total, this gives me x minus 4 times x plus 2. Remember, we need to set it equal to 0. Okay, we set each factor equal to 0 now. So we get x minus 4 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. Now I solve for x in each one. So I'm doing plus 4 here. I get x equals 4, and on this one, minus 2 on both sides, so I get x equals -2. Lastly, I'm writing these as points with the y-coordinate as 0. It's going to be 4, 0, and -2, 0. Now you might be wondering, why 0? Like, how do we know that it's going to be 0? We know it's 0 because that's what we set y equal to. So at the very beginning, you're setting this whole thing equal to 0 here. So we set y equal to 0. So we already know at the very beginning that y is equal to 0. And that's when we figure out what our x values are. So we already know y is 0, and then we put in those x values. Alright, let's look at our next problem. So we set it equal to 0. And now we're looking to factor this. Okay, well let's see what we notice about this. There's only two things here. There's a minus in between them. Let's see if we could do difference of two squares here. 9, well that's a square. X squared, that's also a square. And then 16 is also a square. So I'm going to do this with the difference of two squares. If you need more help on that, look at that difference of two squares video. And so this is going to be 0 equals. We're taking the square roots. Again, take the square root. One's minus, one's plus. We set each one equal to 0. And we solve each one. So this one, I'm adding 4 to both sides. And x is still not by itself, so I need to divide by 3 on both sides. So we get x is equal to 4 over 3. Same idea here. We subtract 4 from both sides here. So we get 3x is equal to -4. And again, I need to divide by 3 on both sides here. So I get x is equal to -4 over 3. Now, if you recall, I write them as points. So it's going to look at like 4 over 3, 0, and -4 over 3, 0. So those are my answers. Okay, next one. So if we look at this one, there's 3 terms here, right? I have an x squared, an x, and a 2, but it's not just x squared anymore. It's like that number in front. So we're going to do the hard factoring with the x. So on the top, it's going to be the 6, right? Because I'm going to have to multiply them. On the bottom is -7. On the sides, it's -6 and -1 because they multiply to give you +6. They had to give you -7. I'm going to do this the shorter way. So it's going to be x minus 6 times x minus 1, but we can't forget about that 3. So we're dividing both of these by 3 here. 6 divided by 3 just gives me 2, so this is x minus 2. This doesn't go in, so I'm going to multiply this whole thing by 3. So this is going to end up being 3x minus 1. Okay, forgot to set it equal to 0. Very important that you have it equal to 0. So we set it equal to 0, we have these factors now, and now we're setting each one equal to 0. So I get x minus 2 equals 0, and then 3x minus 1 equals 0. I solve, I add 2 to both sides here, so I get x is equal to 2. Add 1 to both sides here, I get 3x is equal to 1. And I'm dividing by 3 on both sides here. So I get x is equal to 1/3. Now I make my points. So I get 2, 0, and then I get 1/3, 0. Okay, let's look at our last example. So again, we're setting this equal to 0. We're going to get, so I'm just going to write this out here. I need to factor. Now there's only 2 things in here. They both have something in common, or at least one thing in common, right? They both have 2's in common, and they both have x's in common. So I'm going to factor out by the greatest common factor. So that's another one of my videos that you should look up if you're a little bit confused. Okay, so they both have a 2x in common, like I said. So we have this 2x squared over 2x minus 2x over 2x. So I have 0 is equal to 2x, and I'm just reducing these, right? I get x minus 1. I set each one of them equal to 0, just like we did before. And I solve. Divide by 2 on both sides here, so I get x is equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides here, so I get x is equal to 1. So I have 0, 0 here, and I have 1, 0 here. Now the last thing that you might be wondering is, why do we set it equal to 0 in the first place? So the reason we do that is because we're really trying to find the x-intercepts. That's another word for solving. Solving is like finding x-intercepts. And remember, when we solved for the x-intercepts, or when we did x-intercepts before by the graph, we looked to see where it was equal, we looked to see where it crossed the x-axis, right? In other words, that's where y equals 0. So that's where this whole idea of setting it equal to 0 comes from, is because we are finding the x-intercepts. As you can see, everything ends in 0, just like I talked about with graphing earlier. Okay, now here is your bonus question. I want you to solve this by factoring. So I want you to choose the correct factoring technique, or techniques plural if you need to use more, if you need to use more than one. So make sure you're factoring that, make sure you set each one equal to 0, and you solve. Good luck.